My top 10 waiver wire ads for week 12 lock in because this week's waiver wire list actually has a ton of start worthy options, which unfortunately means we did have some injuries this weekend, but also some big breakout, standout performances, some juicy little pieces that you absolutely must add. And must add is often a hyperbole, but I am not kidding you guys. These are must ads this week. And quite frankly, I might have to make another video because I have a legitimate 10 additional players that could be on this list. That's how crazy this week was. So let's go ahead and dive right in because we've got a ton to talk about here. I don't even have words for our glorious king, Jacoby Brissett, but if I have to use words, I'm going to use statistics. 42 completions, 57 attempts, 82% completion rating, for 452 yards and 2 touchdowns. Yeah, we got a couple of negative points from a couple of interceptions, but we don't care about that. He can turn the ball over all he wants because there is nobody coming to replace him at quarterback since the Cardinals decided to put Kyler Murray on IR. Thank you, Cardinals. He is the Cardinals starter, and we love him. He has already had his bye week. His rest of season schedule is a vision of beauty. Next week, he gets Jacksonville, a very pass-friendly matchup, followed by Tampa Bay, a matchup that means he will be chasing points again. We love it when he chases points. It's so much fun. Followed by the Rams, another matchup where he will be chasing points. Week 15 against Houston, we don't really love that there, but quite frankly, we probably will roll out our glorious king regardless there. Followed by a matchup against an Atlanta defense that just got lit up by Bryce Young, and then a championship matchup, the Holy Grail against Cincinnati. Jacoby Brissett is a QB1 rest of season. I know it feels uncomfortable to say it, but the facts are the facts, and we love him, not only for what he does for our fantasy lineups, but for what he does for his pass catchers. Trey McBride is hitting at an absolutely insane rate, and his receivers, we'll get to that in a second here. Trust Jacoby Brissett. Josh Jacobs left the game with an injury, and Emanuel Wilson finally showed exactly why he is a priority handcuff. Jacobs was having a good game, and then he went down early. Wilson had 11 carries for 40 yards, a touchdown, and 1 reception for 9 yards and a 2-point conversion. The Packers have leaned heavily on the run this season. In just 9 games this season, Jacobs has the 5th most attempts in the league heading into this week. The results haven't been flashy from a yardage perspective, but he has 11 touchdowns on the season. He has pretty much been a lock to get a touchdown in every single game, and that usage transfers directly to Emanuel Wilson if Jacobs is out. Now, good news here. The Jacobs injury doesn't seem like it's a significant season-ending injury, but we'll have to see how long he's out. But if he is out, Emanuel Wilson has legitimate RB2 upside. Jordan Love has been incredibly inconsistent this season, so pivoting and leaning aggressively on the pass seems very unlikely. Wilson has been fine this season in his limited usage. I think he'll do very well as a replacement here. If you follow me, you know how I feel about this one. I was a little early on it, but the point still stands. When the Jags put Travis Hunter on IR, one of the things that we talked about was the possibility of the Jags just leaning heavily on their run game, because despite their schedule being objectively awful for running backs, they've got excellent options that they can just lean on in the backfield. Travis Etienne has been fine this year, so by no means am I panicking on Travis Etienne. We're not having a job-stealing situation. But I am not shocked that we saw this level of production from Bhayshul Tuten. Tuten absolutely exploded in week 11 with 15 carries for 74 yards and a touchdown. Now again, Travis Etienne, awesome day. 19 carries, 73 yards, 2 touchdowns. Then LeQuint Allen Jr. did get some burn as well. I believe that most of that was after Tuten went down with the injury there. The Jags absolutely demolished the Chargers 35-6. Trevor Lawrence only threw the ball 22 times. He completed 14 of those attempts, so no knock on Trevor. He was efficient. It was a fine day. Fine day-ish. 153 yards, a touchdown, did get an interception there. So the pass catchers were very minimized in this matchup, and that really shouldn't be a surprise there. This was not a good matchup for the pass. Technically, it wasn't a good matchup for the run, but definitely a bad matchup for the pass there. And this is 3 weeks in a row now that we have seen the Jags emphasize the run. So all of this is starting to make sense here. Week 9 was a game where Travis Etienne had 22 carries and Bhayshul Tuten had 9 carries and a touchdown. Week 10 10 was an extremely difficult matchup against a very stout Houston run defense where Travis Etienne had 16 carries. And now we turn around to week 11. I do think this trend here where we continue to see the Jags lean on their strength, which is definitely the run, is going to stick. And Tuten's performance today was too good to think that the Jags were going to back away and start minimizing him in the offense and roll things back to the way it was before. He was strong, he was powerful, he was electric, everything that you want in a running back. Unfortunately, he left the game with an ankle injury. Now, it was a blowout, so perhaps if it was a close situation, maybe he could have come back. He did speak with the media afterwards. That does seem to indicate that it's not a major issue there, but we'll have to see. Regardless, I do have to include him, even because he has the injury here, because if it is not serious, you need to prioritize him as a waiver wire pickup. And even if it is serious, I mentioned earlier that LeQuint Allen Jr. did well in relief of Bhayshul Tuten, so if it's something like a high ankle sprain that's a multi-week injury, it would probably behoove you to look at Allen as a potential add here as well. It happened, people. We talked about Christian Watson in the start sit video and the waiver wire stash video. My God, we talked about Christian Watson a lot, and I'm glad that he finally pulled through. I said that we needed to add him before this game because this was a matchup against the Giants that does profile as one where he would go off, and go off he absolutely did. 4 receptions on 5 targets for 46 yards and 2 touchdowns. This being his coming out party was not a surprise here. The first 2 games of the season, he played just a modest snap count. Wasn't super low, but it was definitely below where we would typically like to see him in this version of the Packers receiving core. Last week, we did see that snap count jump to over 80%, indicating that Matt LaFleur was feeling a little bit more comfortable with him on the field and working him up to more typical usage here. That was good to see. The matchup was difficult with Philadelphia, so it was not productive from a fantasy perspective. But now, in an excellent matchup against the Giants, we finally see the wide receiver 1 version of Christian Watson. And that is great news because the Packers' upcoming matchups over the next 3 weeks are Minnesota, Detroit, and Chicago. All divisional matchups, very critical there. They are also all pass-friendly matchups or pass-encouraging matchups there. We know that Jayden Reed is close to returning. So again, that's why I wanted to stash him, because we don't want to be out here dumping crazy fab on Christian Watson, but he is an excellent flex option over the next several weeks here. And if he does manage to maintain this level of production and involvement when Jayden Reed does return, the Packers' playoff matchups are week 15 against Denver, which is obviously difficult there. It's not something where we would want to start him. But if you make it out the first round, we've got a beautiful matchup against Chicago and then a high volume matchup against Baltimore. We talked about Jacoby Brissett, so of course we're going to talk about Michael Wilson here. We don't know how long Marvin Harrison Jr. is going to be out, but while he is out, Michael Wilson has ascended to the elite level of streaming options here. In the stash video, I talked about Michael Wilson. I joked about the fact that there are only so many passes that can go to Trey McBride. In no way, shape, or form did I think Michael Wilson was getting 15 receptions on 18 targets for 185 yards. That is insane. That is a Jamar Chase level game there. Wilson is on the table for as long as Marvin Harrison Jr. is out, and quite frankly, after that, given the level of volume that we have seen from Jacoby Brissett, I would not be shocked if Wilson remains a flex option. So you do want to still invest in him even when Marvin Harrison Jr. returns, because we have to remember that Zay Jones was put on IR. Now, Zay Jones was not someone who we were trusting from a fantasy perspective, but he was playing a significant amount of snaps and seeing targets. It is enough that them removing that probably does make Michael Wilson more of a permanent fixture and reliable flex option in this offense. And if you kind of bookend and piece together the games where Jones wasn't active or targeted, those were factually Wilson's better games. So the trend does make sense there. So his absence might be enough to make Wilson a permanent low-end flex option if he'll be the clear third look behind Trey McBride and Marvin Harrison Jr. So keep that in mind when you're putting in your waiver claim and wondering just how much you should prioritize Wilson. Jaylen Warren was injured again, unfortunately, was in and out of the game and ultimately left the game. We saw a massive game as a result from Kenneth Gainwell and a huge contribution through the air. 9 carries for 24 yards, but 7 receptions on 8 targets for 81 yards and 2 touchdowns. It has been a few weeks since we've seen that reliable standalone value for Kenneth Gainwell that we had grown to kind of appreciate earlier this season, but he showcased exactly why he is a must roster here. He is such a high-end handcuff, and the lack of reliability in the Steelers' receiving core continues to mean more receptions for the running backs. It's going to continue throughout this entire year. We have got ample evidence in terms of Gainwell's role in this offense, and I fully understand that a lot of you love Caleb Johnson. I get it. He did have some usage in this game, and he did, look good to his credit, but Gainwell is the direct handcuff, and more importantly than anything, he is the one that catches the passes. Caleb Johnson doesn't do that. When we are looking at a running back for Pittsburgh in this offense, we want the one that has receptions. Happy Sean Tucker legacy game. For the second year in a row, Sean Tucker has blessed us with an insane, random 30-plus fantasy point game. But was this actually a random game, or was it a running back just snatching away Rachaad White's spot yet again? Because Sean Tucker absolutely had himself a day. 19 carries, 106 yards, 2 touchdowns, plus 2 receptions. It was good to see him get this receiving work. 2 receptions, 2 targets, 34 yards, and a touchdown there. Oddly enough, this was one of Rachaad White's best games on the ground. He did outsnap Sean Tucker, but it wasn't enough. Rachaad outsnapped him because he was playing on passing downs and in the hurry-up offense. Tucker dominated early down work. Yeah, Tucker bullied him out of that lead back role, and Rachaad essentially outsnapped him because the Bucs were chasing points. Regardless, Tucker was far more successful here. This is going to be extremely tough in terms of how we approach this because the Bucs trotted out both Bucky Irving and Chris Godwin this week in a limited capacity, and neither one of them appeared to be close to actually playing this week. So how exactly do we approach this? Because technically speaking, these guys weren't on IR, and there were a ton of questions around what exactly was the timeline and what was going on with them. I do find it kind of ironic that both of them suddenly showed up to practice jogging around. I'm not trying to be a conspiracy theory person, but I do find it odd. But for us, that makes things difficult and complicated because we felt like Tucker was on the cusp of pushing White out of the way. This makes sense. This doesn't feel random. And if we knew that Bucky Irving was going to be out, we would absolutely lean into Tucker. We would shoot him up to the top priority on this waiver wire ad list. And to make matters worse, though, we've got a matchup against the LA Rams coming up this week. That is an objectively awful matchup for running backs. We don't truly know if Bucky Irving will return this week. And considering how well Baker Mayfield is moving the ball, there would be goal line opportunities as well. And those would definitely tilt towards Sean Tucker. So Sean Tucker is worth an ad and would be very start worthy if Bucky Irving is out again. Just be cautious because we do have to approach this with the thought that Irving could be back very soon. I talked about the Giants' run game and their potential in this matchup against Green Bay when I discussed Tyrone Tracy as a spot start this week in the start-sit video. But it wasn't just Tracy that pulled through here. Tracy and Singletary essentially had the same amount of snaps, ran the same routes, basically got the same amount of carries here. In theory, Tracy was the lead-ish back, but Singletary had a very productive fantasy game. And while he didn't have success on the ground in terms of a whole bunch of yardage, that is not alarming because he was used in short yardage situations. It's not an issue of him being inefficient. It's more of situational usage that resulted in low yardage. But that short yardage did result in 2 touchdowns. This is excellent to see, but there is a slight problem here, and that's what we talked about. The production uptick for the running backs was something that I predicted specifically because of the quarterback change. Ironically, Jameis Winston did end up getting a touchdown on the ground, but he just doesn't run to the level of Jackson Dart. Dart takes away from the overall upside of the running backs naturally. Now, we did hear that the Giants said that they have advised Jackson Dart that he needs to be more cautious with the extent to which he is running. So in the event that actually does happen, the running backs may carry some upside moving forward, but we do have to be cautious because we have watched running quarterbacks be advised not to run over the years, and it rarely amounts to any change. Now, the upcoming matchups for the Giants are Detroit and New England, 2 of the most awful matchups for opposing running backs that you can ask for. And the Giants do have a week 14 bye, and after that, their playoff schedule, though, is very friendly versus Washington, Minnesota, and Vegas. So the Giants are running a clear committee. The split is exactly what we talked about earlier. Early down usage and short yardage usage for Singletary and goal line usage for him as well. And then change of pace, receiving, and then overall upside in terms of having more carries for Tracy as well. Goal line opportunities do mean that Singletary is worth a roster here. We talked about Jayden Higgins in the waiver wire video and the waiver wire stash video. This performance was enough for me to feel comfortable with saying that he is on the path to being the clear wide receiver 2. And it was great for him to see this level of production in a game where the Texans offense looked absolutely awful. Higgins had 4 receptions, 7 targets, 55 yards. That was a fine game, okay? All things considered, that was a fine game. He outsnapped, out-targeted, and outperformed Xavier Hutchinson. That is what we care about here. Our only issue here is the Texans have an awful strength of schedule on paper, but when I look at it, we've got matchups against Buffalo, Indianapolis, Kansas City, Arizona, Vegas, the Chargers. Vegas is the only layup matchup in there, so that's why their strength of schedule is very bad on paper. But really, all of those matchups are with teams that can be thrown on with the exception of Kansas City, right? So we've got a rookie surging in the back half here, which is not uncommon. And that's something that we do want to lean into. And the Texans are desperately needing consistency from someone opposite of Nico Collins here. So Higgins does have great opportunity the rest of the season. Again, this list was extremely tough to narrow down. Bye weeks did help a little bit there. Am I crazy enough to put 3 Cardinals on my waiver wire list? Clearly. And I recommended 3 of them in the high-risk start-sit video. Again, we talked about Emari Demercado in the start-sit video. At that time, Zonovan Knight was not practicing. He had an ankle injury. Knight ended up playing, and instead it was Emari Demercado who went down extremely early with an ankle injury in the game here. The result was a split backfield with Knight and Michael Carter. Now, Michael Carter was uninvolved in the game before Demercado went down, so that is important to note there. That does tell us that this backfield was going to be a split, as we kind of expected there, between Demercado and Knight. Knight had the early down work. He did get some receiving work, so that's very positive there. He got goal line work as well. Carter was primarily used as a receiving option, and I talked about that in terms of the upside that Emari Demercado was going to be getting. Now, we don't know how serious this injury is to Demercado, and we don't know when Trey Benson will be back, if he'll return this week. If not, if both are out there, Emari Demercado and Trey Benson this week, that puts Knight in line to be the most productive back for the Cardinals from a fantasy perspective. The Cardinals will likely be playing from behind again. Jacoby Brissett does move the ball well, so that's not an issue. So he will create goal line opportunities that benefits Knight. And Knight does get a decent amount of targets. He's not stonehand here, so don't think that he will not have upside in games where the Cardinals are playing from behind here. So again, if the injuries remain, Knight is the one that we do want to trust. And friendly reminder, I did not include Alec Pierce on this list because he is really close to 50% rostered in all leagues, and I was trying to keep it to more available options here. But if Alec Pierce is on waivers, you absolutely need to add him. He has weekly high upside and a reliable enough floor that you do want to roster him, and he is a weekly flex option. Thank you so much for watching this video. If you enjoyed the video, be sure to like the video and subscribe to my channel. Be sure to follow me across all social media platforms at It's Sarah Time, and make sure that you are tuned in, subscribe, follow, turn on notifications, all that good stuff, because we are locked in. We are closing out the fantasy season strong here. Every week I've got you covered with top waiver wire ads, stashes, live shows where you can ask me any questions that you got, and so much more.